Our next candidate is Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. I know many of you know her. Board of Union Parents and a co-sponsor of the Butch-Lewis Save Our Pension Act. All right. And she fights constantly to save our Central States pension. Let's hear it for Amy Klobuchar.
Incredible group. Thanks for having me. And should I say a few words at the beginning here, Art?
Have a seat.
Oh, you want to put me back?
You get your words at the end.
Okay.
You and I have something in common. My great-grandfather was a Teamster,
Yeah.
and you have a long family history
Right.
of union workers, and you have repeatedly touted on the campaign trail the importance of union workers. So tell the union workers why it would be important for them to vote for you as president.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank all of my friends here, the Teamsters. The Butch-Lewis Act isn't just a policy for me. I've lived it in my life. I've lived it because, as Leslie just mentioned, I wouldn't be here without unions. My grandpa was an iron ore miner who worked 1,500 feet underground in the mines in northern Minnesota. But before that, he was a Teamster. And he had to quit school in middle school. His parents were sick, 9 brothers and sisters, and he pulled a wagon, and he was a Teamster. When he was in those mines, it was unions that saved his life. It was unions that made those mines safer, because my dad and my grandpa would always tell me about all the coffins lined up in the Catholic Church up there. Every month, someone would die from those mines, and it was unions that made them safer. My grandpa saved money in a coffee can in their basement to send my dad and his brother to a 2-year community college. That's why I'm such a big believer in those colleges. My dad then went on to the University of Minnesota. My mom, she grew up in Milwaukee. She wanted to be a teacher. Thank you, Wisconsin, but not the Packers. She wanted to be a teacher, and she came to Minnesota because they had strong teachers union, and she taught 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. My dad was a member of the Newspaper Guild, so I am before you today as the granddaughter of a Teamster and a union worker, the daughter of a union teacher and a union newspaper man, the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for President of the United States. That is what unions are about. So when I look at these policies, and when that budget bill came over and everyone said, oh, we should all vote for it, I think it was Claire McCaskill and me, we looked at this thing, he said, what's this Central States pension provision in it? And it was bad. It was really bad, and we voted against that because that was in there. And then at least we now have a fighting chance to save the pensions with the work that's being done by my good friend Sherrod Brown, who so strongly believes in the dignity of work. And we are trying to push that bill to get done. I also believe that unions help everyone, and I am so proud that our staff is now organized by Teamsters, Iowa Local 238. Thank you for that. And continue to work with our Minnesota Teamsters, who we're very proud of, quiet group in the front. Thank you so much for your supports in my last elections. It's really meant a lot. So I'd love to answer questions.
Well, Senator, I'm not real sorry that Iowa ruined the Minnesota Gophers' perfect season.
I would just like to point out, in addition to having one of the few teams named after a rodent, that the Gophers had their first season where they won 10 games since 1905.
Well, anyway, there's that. But we also have a video question here from Yulene Yurgain, and she became the first woman Teamster employed at Roadway Express when she started working there as a driver in 1966 as a member of Local 886. Over the years, she became one of the most active trade unionists in her hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And again, her issue is pensions.
My name is Yulene Yergin. I am a member of Teamsters Local 886 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My question is, what will you do to protect my pension? Will you support Senate 2254? Central State's pension is due to become insolvent in 2025. There are two reasons this bill is important to us. Number one, it will save the pension of 400,000 retirees. And number two, it is the right thing to do. If you do the right thing, you will never be sorry.
So I believe that promises that are made should be promises kept. And when you look at the original proposal there, it would have cut hardworking people who worked their whole life, cut their pension, people who were near retirement, 50, 60, 70%, and that's what was so wrong. So out of that, we pushed to have changes, and Teamsters organized town halls actually all over the country where there were a lot of people who were in Central State's pension. We brought the Treasury officials out there, they listened, and we ended up being able to pretty much break open the whole thing. So that agreement did not stand in place. The next thing that happened was that the Butch-Lewis Act was introduced, and I wish that Butch-Lewis was alive today to see the work that we're going to do, because as president, I will get it done. We must make sure that people have their pensions, and that includes the Central State's pension, that includes minors, and we have to plan for the future as well for new workers, but we want to make sure as we do that by shoring up Social Security. I have been against all efforts to privatize it, by lifting the cap on where the payroll taxes are taken out of so we can keep it solvent beyond where it goes now, which is about 2034, it'll start paying out at 90%. And then we also must think of the new workers and give them the right to organize. We have this whole gig economy right now. 1/3 of our workers are in this gig economy. And making sure that they have the right to organize is going to be key, because I believe that unions, and this is all about misclassification of workers and making sure they're classified the right way, that unions make for a stronger economy. When unions are strong, our economy is strong. When unions are strong, America is strong.
I'm really confused about these teams. I'm from Boston, never heard of them. I just know socks and hats, if anybody from Raymond with hats. That's
My dad once wrote a book called Will the Vikings Ever Win the Super Bowl? It was in the early 1980s, and sadly it's still relevant today.
I didn't mean to have pain here. Senator, we have a question from the audience, and this is from Mr. Paul Wojner. Paul is Secretary Treasurer of Teamsters Local Union 407 in Cleveland, Ohio, and he has a question about health care.
Okay.
First, I'd like to welcome Senator Klobuchar to this forum. Healthcare is the issue that I have, and healthcare has been an issue the last election cycle, this election cycle, and I'm sure it's going to be the big issue in the next election cycle. Most Americans believe that everyone should have a right to affordable health care. And while some of us pay $27,000 a year for health care, luckily the Teamsters negotiate contracts in many industries that offer high quality health care at little to no cost to our members. However, the quality benefits came at a price. Our members agreed to less wages to get better benefits. So my questions are, what policies do you support that would help raise the bar to all Americans without having to lower the benefits that our members fought for and won? And secondly, since tax on health care would penalize our members for sacrifices that they already incurred, would you be in favor of the elimination of the so-called Cadillac tax on high-quality health plans?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am a co-sponsor of that bill, I believe that we should eliminate that tax. That's first. Secondly, thank you, one person in the front. Okay, secondly, when it comes to health care, I think stepping back a little, you must have the right to collectively bargain. And what the Iowa Supreme Court did recently, which was really putting a rubber stamp on what the legislature did, is exactly the same thing that the U.S. Supreme Court did in Janus. And that's why, as president, I would make sure we pass Mazie Hirono's bill, which I am a co-sponsor now, which guarantees the rights of public sector workers to collectively bargain. That's the first thing. The second thing, when it comes to health care, if you've been watching any of the debates, you guys been watching them, we keep having this same debate over and over. And I am the one from the beginning that said, I read the Medicare for All bill. I read it, and I'm the only member of Congress on that stage that is not on that bill. And I didn't get on it as well intentioned as it was because I read it. And on page 8, it basically says that people, 149 million Americans, including a bunch of the people in this room that are union members, would lose their current health care. And I don't think that's a smart way to go. What I want to do is this. I want to build on the Affordable Care Act. And let's remember that right now in this country, the Affordable Care Act is 10 points more popular than the President of the United States, Obamacare. So the way you do this, when you start seeing it as a beginning and not an end, you say, okay, how can we make this better? Well, you make it better with a nonprofit public option. That will bring down the premiums, and it's a smart way to do it, and it's what President Obama wanted to do from the beginning. The second thing we can do is take on the pharmaceutical companies. And I have been leading those bills from the beginning. They are things like getting rid of the ban on negotiation for Medicare. That would bring prices down for everyone, not just 43 million seniors. It is putting a cap on pharmaceutical prices. The bill over in the House right now that Speaker Pelosi is leading would save $350 billion for taxpayers just by taking the average internationally, bringing in less expensive drugs from other countries like Canada. That is a Klobuchar-Sanders amendment that almost passed. I can see Canada from my porch, in addition to Iowa, from Minnesota, and we see what those less expensive prices are. So those are some ideas, and I think if we just look at this, not taking away hard bargained health care, but instead making it easier for unions to organize, public sector and others, and I would do that, by the way, by passing the PRO Act, which would make a big difference for taking away the penalties and making sure there's no retaliation and making sure there's no misclassification. You combine those things with working on these issues with healthcare, and it's going to make it better for everyone, because you all know, when you're a member of the union, you represent that union, and you're a proud member of that union. But you don't just help union workers, you help all workers. And thank you for that question.
Earlier, when you talked about misclassification in the workplace, this is a huge issue for union workers. I live in California, in that state. It's a very big problem, especially in agricultural areas. Rules like the ABC test that clarify when workers can be classified as independent contractors, etc., a lot of people support. Do you support that? And what other ways, if you're elected president, would you work to combat this?
Well, I think the thing you have to do is to make sure that our people can organize. And this is going to be battled out in the courts. And why it's so important who the president is the president appoints the attorney general. And the attorney general is going to decide what kind of cases to proceed on. And the president will have a lot of say in what these rules are with the Department of Labor and who is appointed to the National Labor Relations Board. All of that is important. There's a lot of things that work together here, but the key is to make sure that people can organize. Right now, as I mentioned, a third of our workers are in this gig economy. They're working part-time, and a lot of them are being abused, actually. They're putting them part-time, they're combining jobs, and they don't have access to benefits. So by allowing them to organize, you change everything for them, because then they're going to have access to the kind of health care negotiations and the kind of child care negotiations and things we want to have in place. The other thing I would do is take some of these tax breaks that the president gave to big corporations and to wealthy people, and I would use that money to help regular people. You can do that with child care. The proposal out there, it takes 150% of the median income, right, average income, and it says if you make less than that, then you shouldn't have to pay more than 7% of your wages for child care. And if you do, the rest of that, the government will help you with that. That helps the whole economy. Those kinds of proposals will help people, whether they're in the union or not, but it's going to make sure that those workers in the gig economy are helped and that they are able to get retirement and able to get Social Security and things like that. So I really think we have to step back and look at this economy, make sure we're protecting the people who worked hard, that's what the Butch Lewis is about, so they can get their benefits, but then also make sure that we're thinking ahead. And right now, unions are on the rise. If they weren't, I couldn't say 4 good words for you. Former Governor Scott Walker. Unions. Thanks to Jim Hoffa's work and your leadership and so many people in this room on the front line, unions have become more popular because people have figured out that their lives get better when unions are out there and that they feel isolated and no one's going to stand up for them. And certainly that guy in the White House, despite what he promised people, and there were a lot of members of a lot of unions that actually voted for him because they thought, oh, he's going to get this done, he's going to make things cheaper for me, he's going to do that stuff. Those were false promises. And that's one of the cases that, yes, I will make, but I'm asking you to make it too, because they're going to listen to you. And they're going to hear about the kind of judges he's put in place that have been against union rights, and the kind of policies that he's put in place that have hurt the ability to organize, and the kind of people he's put on the NLRB, and the kind of person he just put on in charge of the Labor Department. You're going to have to make those cases because while a lot of money has gone up to the top, there has not been shared prosperity in this country, and he has betrayed the people he made those promises to.
Thanks, Senator. You favor important changes to Taft-Hartley, the father of all modern anti-labor legislation. Isn't it time to get rid of Taft-Hartley like Harry Truman wanted to do?
That would be one way.
Why not?
Okay. Well, what I think we have to do is make sure we have the right to collective bargain, and that we make sure we put these provisions in all of our government contracts, and then we make clear that there is protection for our workers. My one experience in a big way with this was some of the prevailing wage laws, and that was when I had the job before the one I have now. I was county attorney, and I had the biggest county in Minnesota, right, over 1 million people, and I put a full-time person on prevailing wage, because you can have all the laws you have on the books, whether they're good or bad, but if you don't enforce them in the way that helps workers, it doesn't matter. I put a full-time lawyer on that to make sure that we were enforcing it. And then that lawyer helped counties all over our state, because a lot of the small rural counties aren't able to hire someone to do that full-time. That was the kind of precedent I set, and I will continue to support these labor laws that are allowing for collective bargaining, and that we make sure these government contracts, when we give them out, they're fair and they go to union workers.
And would you like to give us a closing statement?
Well, I would. You look so cheery in your bow tie, Art.
I love you too.
I want to start with this. I'll start with kind of I know there's been some dramatic speeches here, but a holiday story. And that is a story about my daughter. My husband's out there somewhere. I don't know where he went. But when our daughter was about, I think, 8, 9 years old, we went to see that movie Polar Express. And maybe some of you remember that movie. Tom Hanks was in it. He played the conductor of this train. And our daughter walks out of it and she says to me, Mom, there's one thing in that movie that wasn't true. And I say, what was it? Was it when the train went over the big lake and it froze over immediately so the train could keep going? She goes, no, that wasn't it. And I said, well, was it the million elves that were up at the North Pole? No, that wasn't it. And I said, what was the thing that wasn't true? She said, well, it was when that conductor, who was Tom Hanks, is standing on the train at the end, and the little kid comes over, and Tom Hanks looks at the little kid, and he says, come on, kid, get on the train, get on the train. And the kid's hesitating, and then the conductor says, it doesn't matter which way the train is going, just get on the train. True story, she looks at me and she says, Mom, that's not true. It does matter which way the train is going. That is a good lesson for this election. It matters which way the train is going. Look at what Donald Trump has done. He went down to Mar-a-Lago after that tax bill was signed. He went down there and he said to his friends, I just made you a lot richer. You just got a lot richer. We cannot forget that. And you, as ambassadors to all these working people that you see every day, you got to tell them that. Because they've got to see that that's where his head is, and that's what he did. I will come in this in a much different way as president. You know I know the policies. I passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat in that gridlock of Washington, D.C. And I did it because I was able to work with people and figure out how to get things done. That's going to be important. But the most important thing is going to be to win. Because, yes, this is a matter of economics, and all these things we want to do, from the Butch-Lewis Act, to bringing down the cost of pharmaceuticals, to putting those labor protections in place, to making sure we're standing up for workers and standing up for people in the rural areas, we're not going to be able to do that unless we win big. And the way we win big is not shutting people out with policies that they don't support. How we win big is bringing them with us in a big, big way. It is to remember that we must have an optimistic economic agenda for the people of this country. And I've got proof. We won in Wisconsin, the governor's race. We won in Michigan. We won in Pennsylvania after we lost in 2016. Because we put up candidates that went there not just where it's comfortable, but where it's uncomfortable. We just won in Kentucky and Louisiana. We won. Mitch McConnell, and don't tell me we can't win the Iowa Senate race if we won in Kentucky and Louisiana. We won despite the fact that Donald Trump went down there and did a rally with the opponents of the Democrats the night before. My question is, where can we send him next? That is what happened. We won. And so that's what I don't want us to forget here. This is an economic check for working people. But this is also a patriotic check. This is a values check. This is a decency check. I have won every race, every place, every time. Every congressional district, the reddest of red, Michelle Bachmann's, the district that borders Iowa, and I've done it by bringing people with me. I've done it because I've listened to those workers and those steel workers in northern Minnesota. And we don't want to eke by a victory at 4 in the morning. Then we are not going to be able to get this bill passed, and we're not going to be able to get these workers' rights. We've got to win big. And so that's what I leave you with. Think about going with someone that has that proven track record of standing with unions, yes, of getting things done, yes, but also of winning big. Literally every race, every place, every time, all the way down to 4th grade. When my slogan that I've since discarded, all the way with Amy Kay. I'm not going to use that one. I don't think it's a good idea, but what I will use is this. That this is something former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan once said this. She said, what America wants is something quite simple. They want a country as good as its promise. If we remember that, and we go with decency, and we think big, and we have big values, we win. So let's go out there and get it done, and I would love your support. Thank you.